I'm Joe Feeks, editor of Poultry Health Today, and with me is Ellie Chadwick. She is a graduate research assistant at North Carolina State University. Welcome back, Ellie. Good to see you again.
Thank you. I appreciate you having me so much.
So now, last we talked, you were at Auburn. You've since moved over to North Carolina, and they raise a lot of turkeys in North Carolina, don't they?
They do. I was working with salmonella research, and then I got called over by Dr. Robert Beckstead. He was kind enough to offer me a position for my PhD, and then now I'm still doing microbiology, but I'm working with a protozoan, Histomonas Meleagridis.
Now, when I think of Histomonas, I always think of turkeys, but you're doing most of your work in broiler breeders. Why is that?
Yes, so broiler breeders are actually an ideal carrier for Histomonas, mainly because when turkeys become infected, they are almost guaranteed to die.
So the Histomonas in broiler breeders might get transferred to the turkeys?
It can, but Histomonas loves broiler breeders because it can just keep circulating and the birds survive the infection. Histomonas becomes a normal part of their gut microflora, and then they say, okay, we're not leaving. This is cozy, and the birds are happy, and we see limited effects on what happens unless there's another infection going on.
And why is that?
Usually if there's a co-infection that happens, it's usually something stress-related, and then when birds become stressed, just like you and me, our immune system goes down. That allows for Histomonas to blossom, but the chicken compared to the turkey can mount an immune response to Histomonas, and it says, hold on, calm down. We're going to cause a reaction in the ceca, but instead of traveling to the liver, which is what's shown to kill turkeys, the chicken's able to maintain it in the ceca, relaxes almost, and then they're able to go through, and the birds are just able to circulate Histomonas, and they're fine.
And it's not really harming the broiler breeders that much?
There was a concern that there was going to be morbidity, a drop in egg production, if it would change body weights, and we ran a flock study and we saw lighter birds, but we've actually seen an increase in egg production. So far that data is still being analyzed, but our goal is that we'll have that paper out by the end of this summer.
Okay, so the parasite is not bothering the broiler breeders in any significant way, but you're focused on them to help control it in turkeys, is that right?
Correct. So the idea is that we're going to break the life cycle of Histomonas, is that we can see it's carried from the broiler breeders over to the turkeys.
And how does it make that trip?
So there's different vectors that can move it, whether or not that's insects, whether or not that's mice, it can be people. The vector that's used to carry Histomonas is Heterakis, which is a cecal nematode's egg. That egg is really sticky, and it can stick onto clothes. You don't see it when it sticks, so if you're not careful in the movement, then it can bring contaminated equipment from broiler breeders to turkeys, and then that can allow for an infection.
It's really fascinating because I know that the turkey industry, ever since they lost a certain medication a few years ago, has been really struggling with Histomonas. It's always been, blackhead has been rated as one of the top diseases, but from hearing you talk about it, the solution could be in broiler breeders, not in the turkeys themselves.
Yes, so both in controlling Histomonas as well as understanding why the turkey is having an immune response that is not effective towards Histomonas, we can use the broiler breeder as our example. So we can use the broiler breeder to stop moving Heterakis from the broiler breeder facilities that are contaminated over to turkeys, but also we can compare the immune responses between a broiler breeder and a turkey, look at the differences and see what the turkey's lacking. And then we'd be able to do some genetic work and be able to show what the difference is, and maybe we can create a turkey that actually has an effective immune response to this parasite.
Well, because turkeys have shown some resistance to Histomonas, is that correct? That might only be 5% of the population, but
yes,
it is there.
Yes, our lab, one of our lab mates, Alessandro, presented on this at IPPE this year, and he showed that right around 5% of birds, sex did not matter, they were resistant to this parasite, and that was after 3 infections with Histomonas. Usually 1 is more than enough to kill.
Yeah. So practically speaking, I mean, if it's a large operation and they're both in the chicken business and the turkey business, then they can talk to each other. But if you're a turkey producer and you're not involved in broiler breeders at all,
what else can you do?
What can you do?
Yes, so we've actually found there's a lot of facilities that were previously broiler facilities. They switched over to turkeys, and then they had blackhead outbreaks. And they weren't doing proper cleaning and sanitation, And that they didn't understand why they were getting blackhead outbreaks because they switched over to turkeys and they don't have chickens around any of their farms. But previously they did. And so if it's not properly cleaned, or if you have insects that stay around the area after the clean out has happened, it can be brought in and cause disease.
Any transmission through the feed?
We have not seen transmission through the feed. Histomonas is anaerobic. It's actually difficult to transmit orally. So for Histomonas to survive through the digestive tract, it needs some sort of encapsulation, which encapsulation technology could be the new way that we'd be able to deliver something to help control Histomonas. But Histomonas itself, if birds have eaten, the acidity in the digestive tract is enough to kill off Histomonas.
Now, there's been a lot of pressure, particularly on the chicken industry, to reduce antibiotics. Everybody wants the no antibiotics ever label on their meat packages and so forth.
Yeah.
Is that driving any of this? Because as we cut back medications, are broiler breeders, for example, going to be more likely to have Histomonas?
So right now we're running a study and trying to figure out what Histomonas is eating. We know it's bacteria. We just don't know exactly what bacteria it is. And just like me and you, we need our snacks every once in a while. If Histomonas can get to an area where there's a lot of food, it is happy to stay. And so as we're having more infections come out, usually they're bacterial based, most likely you're going to see a Histomonas infection afterwards.
What should turkey producers be telling their friends and colleagues in the broiler breeder industry? Is there a convincing argument they can make to say, hey, you guys need to get Histomonas under control because it helps me? I mean, how does that work?
So what we can really show is that with a little bit of Histomonas infection, the broiler breeders are okay. But if you have a co-infection from some other stressor, you're going to see a proliferation of Histomonas, which means you're going to see much worse disease signs. That's where you're going to see your mortality and morbidity with broiler breeders. So it would be to the broiler breeders' benefit if they just didn't have to deal with Histomonas at all.
We've been talking with Ellie Chadwick. She is a graduate research assistant at North Carolina State University. Thanks for coming by.